Is eczema linked to gut health? My name is Dr. Taranella, and in this video we're going to discuss whether or not eczema is linked to gut health. And spoiler alert, it is linked. But I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth on what some of the research has to say about this, some of the mechanisms behind it, what's the common link between gut and skin. They're so far apart. How is it possible that they could be linked? And also share a little bit of my clinical experience treating people with eczema and other skin issues, and how that's turned out. So if this is something that interests you, keep watching. We're going to get into the details. We're all about helping you gain deeper knowledge and understanding of what's going on in your body. That's why we produce these videos. So hopefully this edition gets you a little bit closer towards that aim. I also wanted to point out that sometimes when I'm producing these videos and content, that sometimes I get a slight thing wrong, like quoting something, a stat or a name of something. And so there's a corresponding blog article on our website, swintegratedmedicine.com/blog, that has a lot more detail, and we'll correct those mistakes if there are any. It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes it does, and the blog article will correct for those. So I also wanted to point out that if you like this type of information, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you watching. If you do have any questions about any of the content, either here or on the blog, that's what the comment section is for, to ask those questions. So again, thanks for watching, and let's dig into it. So is eczema linked to gut health? In my clinical experience, it definitely is, and I'm going to share some of my experiences with patients having eczema and treating them through focusing in on problems that they have with their gut. But I also want to give a little color on some of the newer research that is looking at this question and attempting to understand not only is it linked, but how it's linked. And we know from a very sort of rudimentary standpoint that the way that it's linked is through the immune system, or at least this is the main, if it is linked. And we'll look at a research paper that, maybe validates that a little bit more. And we often talk about the immune system as if it's one thing. We say, well, let's increase your immune system to help your body fight off a cold or a flu or something, or let's suppress your immune system because you have autoimmune disease or you have allergies or things like this. But your immune system actually has a lot of different layers to it. And so we want to be more specific when we're talking about the immune system. So when we say increase or suppress, we really need to define which aspect or which layer of your immune system we're talking about. So let's break it down into its component parts, or a little bit more individually, and look at different aspects of the immune system so we can better understand how eczema is linked to gut health via the immune system. So in a very broad sense, we can break the immune system down into two different aspects. We have the innate immune system, which is a very nonspecific aspect of the immune system, and then we have the acquired or adaptive immune system. We'll get into that second one later, but first we'll talk a little bit about the innate immune system. So once a microbe or toxin is ingested into the body, and usually this is coming in via food or breathing it in, it has to get past that physical barrier. So if you take in like some food poisoning or something like that, there's bacteria on that's going to try to enter your body and live in your body. And the first thing is it has to get past the acid and things in your digestive tract, but then that physical barrier also comes into play, where it has to get past that physical barrier. So the first part of the innate immune system is the physical barrier. Then in addition to that, there's also specific white blood cells that are engaged in this non-specific innate immune response. And these types of white blood cells are usually positioned very close in proximity to that physical barrier. So they're oftentimes, close to the lungs, close to the physical barrier in the digestive tract, so that if that first physical barrier breaks down, now you have that backup white blood cell that's going to start to isolate these bugs or pathogens or toxins or whatever it is that's going to be a threat to the rest of the host. So these are oftentimes in respiratory tract, digestive, and then also, of course, skin, which is relevant to this question. Is eczema related to gut health? And ultimately, we're going to see how it is related, but I just want to give you sort of a primer on how the immune system, sort of the role that the immune system plays in this, so you can better understand how it's all connected. So this response that the white blood cells are recognizing if something does get through the physical barrier, it's a response where you have to recognize self from non-self. And it does this through receptors that are on the immune cells. They're nonspecific receptors on the immune cells, and all pathogens have similar proteins on them on their surface, which allows the cells in the innate immune response, these white blood cells, to recognize that, oh, this is a microbe that we don't want here. So there's little things jutting out on the pathogen that are common to many pathogens, and that allow the white blood cells in this nonspecific immune response or an innate immune response to recognize those. And basically, it will try and isolate and engulf those those pathogens to prevent it from spreading any further. In a similar way, when there's damage to tissues, there's things in the tissues that also have things that will bind to the white blood cells and trigger those white blood cells to go to the area. So if the pathogen damages some tissues, that will trigger the white blood cells to go to that area, because those tissues have specific proteins that then will bind to the white blood cell, but also the pathogens themselves have things on them that the white blood cells can recognize too. That's the basic sort of innate or non-specific immune system responses throughout the body. So now that we talked about the innate immune system, now I want to briefly discuss this other type of the immune system called the adaptive immune system. And it involves other types of white blood cells called lymphocytes that come from the bone marrow. And these cells are able to recognize previous infectious agents through a specialized process of making immunoglobulins. And there's different types of immunoglobulins. We won't get into that now, but through this process, it is thought that these types of white blood cells, called lymphocytes, are able to have memory, and this is why it's called the adaptive immune response. So how does all this immune stuff relate to eczema? Well, in eczema, we know that in the lesions of the eczema, if you biopsy them, you'll see increased amounts of these innate immune cells, like the macrophages and mast cells. And similarly, many studies have found an increase in these same types of immune cells in the area just outside the digestive tract in patients with IBS. So if you look in the area just below, where your internal stomach lining is, you'll see increased amount of mast cells, macrophages, etc. And so there, we have a common link between the two as being the immune system. Both eczema and IBS have this similarity where there's increased activation of these immune cells. And a recent study looked to see if there's a correlation between the two in actual patients. While the study was pretty small, and I will put a link to that information in the description if you want to look at it specifically. But the study was fairly small, but the researchers did find, quote, "We observed that IBS was more common in the atopic dermatitis group," which is atopic dermatitis is the same as eczema. Also supporting findings like abnormal stool form, abdominal distension, feeling of incomplete evacuation, and straining were found more frequently in the atopic dermatitis patients. So the question is, what is causing all these cells of the innate immune system to be overactivated and increased in number in these lesions and in the gut? So we mentioned earlier in the video that one of the things that triggers these cells are the proteins that sit on top of the pathogens, like different types of bacteria, and also there's environmental antigens that can stimulate this process, and also tissue damage itself can also trigger this process. And so it's one thing to see a research paper and to dig and find things that correlate to this in a setting, in a research setting. But it's another thing to see this play out in actual clinical practice. And I've seen this many times in many of my patients where things related to the skin, specifically eczema, but other types of skin issues, be directly related to digestive and gut health issues. So And it's not just one or two times; it's numerous times, and I'm not the only one. This was taught to me in my naturopathic medical school, and continues to be something that I find very helpful for my patients over and over again. So, treating the gut and things related to gut health often will improve eczema and clear up many different types of skin issues and skin sensitivity. So watch out for the next video on eczema, where I'll be discussing a little bit more in depth on some of the mechanisms, whether or not eczema is the video will be titled, "Is Eczema a Sign of Something More Serious?" And we're going to go into a little more detail on what is going on in the body to trigger this and what you can do about it. Okay, so that should answer the question, is eczema linked to gut health? As we said in the video, it is, and the common link is the immune system. So if you like the video, please click on the like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.